One of the helpful things I've just started reading is a book entitled The New Jim Crow. The author, Michelle Alexander, is an attorney. She is African American. She's worked for the NAACP and some other groups around justice issues and the legal system. And her focus, at least in this book, is on the disproportionate. Her focus is on the disproportionate incarceration of young black men, and how that ability to imprison such a huge group of people has detrimental effects on all of us, but especially on that particular group. These are laws, and especially the drug laws, that say if you're in possession of a drug of whatever description, even if you're not selling it, even if it's a very small amount, in most places have a 3 strikes and you're out rule about that. You are automatically going to jail. And it doesn't seem to matter how long the jail term is. If you've been in jail, there are doors that are closed to you. A felon cannot vote unless a state makes some very particular moves and does put some processes in place, but often those are costly. You have to pay fees, or you have to pay court costs. Housing is a huge area of systemic discrimination. Government-owned housing, subsidized housing. The Supreme Court of our country has said it is legal and it is permissible for a family to lose their housing even if someone who has, a tangential connection with them is caught doing something illegal away from the home. The cousin who stays here sometimes and is caught with drugs, you can be evicted from your home. A man lost his home because a caretaker, someone who was coming in to give him in-home care, was caught with some marijuana. And the Supreme Court has said this is legitimate. The ability to find employment. There are some rules and regulations and laws about the employment of people who've been incarcerated, and you're not supposed to have any blanket rules about, no automatic exclusions of anybody from employment opportunities. But here are job descriptions. September 29th of 2010, no arrests or convictions of any kind for the past 7 years. No felony arrests or convictions of any kind for life. That's a job ad for an electrical contractor. Here's the Court Furniture Rental Company. We are looking for people with spotless background / criminal history. Job ad, this is for warehouse workers and delivery drivers. All candidates will be e-verified and must clear a background check, no priors. That's a job ad for a manufacturing job with Carlisle Staffing in the Chicago area. These are from 2010. In order to qualify as a driver for FedEx, you must have the following: clean criminal record, no misdemeanors, no felonies. And this is for the diesel mechanic and delivery driver jobs. Minimum requirements for employment consideration. No exceptions. No misdemeanors and or felonies of any type ever in background. That's for a warehouse and manufacturing job with Perimeter Staffing in Atlanta. So, it's this group of people need not apply. because there's no chance we're going to look at you.
That certainly shows that we've given up all pretense that the prison system that we have is rehabilitative.
Well, it's legalized slavery because you can't get out. So you get out and you can't find a job, so you reoffend to feed your family and you go back in. And it keeps going. And then your children see that and they start the cycle.
Well, consider the person who encounters these job applications, these job ads, and and has to do something. Someone may give him an opportunity, but he's living in subsidized housing. And his brother-in-law, who stays with them from time to time, gets into trouble and is arrested, he and his family can be evicted from that subsidized housing. So he's got a low wage earning job, if he's got one at all. Now he's homeless. And by the way, if you're homeless, you have a big chance of losing your children. The state will take your children for their own good and put them in a foster care system.
Where they can be abused.
Where they may, it's possible. We know that many foster homes are wonderful and the people are very caring, but we also know horror stories about that. Mm-hmm. So we've got the employment problem, the housing problem, keeping the family together problem, and on top of that, they can't even vote to help change the system.
So you've disenfranchised a whole class of people.
And we have thousands and thousands and thousands of young black men in our prisons. The United States has more people in prison than in any other country in the world. Now think about those children who are growing up in that kind of a context. They have a 4 times more likelihood of being absent from school than other children. And if you're absent from school, you fall behind. That's a fact of life.
And if you go to school in an area that has a high poverty level, you're going to a school with inadequate educational supplies and teachers that's fighting to keep the school alive, so they have to get into this whole thing about no child left behind and passing standardized tests, which have nothing to do with the culture of these children. And then we blame these victims of all this that has been set up structurally and say that, well, they're just, it's their fault. It's a culture of poverty. They don't even try to get out of it. Yeah. They can't get out of it.
I think there's a larger context for this, and the context is that we have institutions that sustain the race paradigm, and that becomes as much an understanding that we have to have in order to begin to think not just about what is happening, but how do we begin to think of ways of addressing and beginning to change it. And understanding that, having a good analysis of racism and how it works within our system is most beneficial, I think, in beginning a process of undoing the racism. And I think that it's important that we have an ability to present, have discussions, take instances such as what's happened with the new Jim Crow, books like that, do an analysis, do an understanding of what is happening there, and demonstrate or show for each other how we participate in it and how we can begin to start thinking and perhaps even beginning to sort of change what's happening.
Yeah.
But I think when the important piece of not of not being able to see this in a lot of cases makes it difficult for us to sort of see this as a needed change and a needed step that we have to kind of go through.
What you're talking about there, sociologically, we call institutional racism. You know, many times the dominant group or majority group will think racism is something that resides in a person's head and the way they think and the way they treat other people, and that is true. But our institutions are also embedded with these structural issues that create those and sustain those systems. So exactly, you're on the right track there.
Yeah. And there are things that we can identify that are present everywhere, even though we may not be aware of them.
Yes.
I mean, some of the information that Michelle Alexander is presenting in her book was news to me. That the Supreme Court had ruled it's legitimate for a family to lose its housing because of a crime they may not even be aware of.
Permanently.
Permanently. That's news. One of the things Bishop Wright urged us to do when he came to speak with us was to find out exactly what it is that's happening in our own context. Get some real information, get some data about what's going on in New Albany, Jeffersonville, what's going on in Indianapolis, what's going on in Lafayette, and in Fishers and in other communities, and find a way to start analyzing it so that we can begin to recognize the institutional, systematic racism that we are largely unaware of. I think that's part of the difficulty, is that this is so often unconscious. And as you were saying earlier, George, without information, we fill in the gaps for ourselves. We do that all the time, and it doesn't matter what the topic is. If we know some information but not all of it, we'll make stuff up. And we really can't afford to do that with this.
We have to come out of our comfort zones.
Yeah.
In Indianapolis right now, we've got a crisis of food deserts going on because we have grocery stores that have left the inner city, and the institutions in Indianapolis haven't stepped up, but the churches have started stepping up to give people rides, senior citizens that can't get there. And I think we have to step out of our neighborhood, step out of our comfort zones, and see the other, and know the other is us.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost that old tale of rescuing that one person floating down the river, and that's as needed as someone going up to the head of the river to see who's tossing the folks
Why are
in.
people falling in the first place?
Yeah. It's a both and. We need those folks to take the elderly who have lost their source of food at a local grocery store, to take them to somewhere where they can stock up for the week. But we also need to address why this mass exodus, and why are the choices only a few fast food places? What do you spend?
And with in Indianapolis, a new public transit system being put in. But is it going to be useful for getting people from their neighborhoods to the goods and services that they need to have?
Is it affordable for them?
Mm-hmm.
It's affordable for maybe the young urban professionals that are moving in, but that doesn't take into account the others.
Exactly.
At my age, I would sure hate to try to travel on a bus with a load of groceries to get home.
That's very true. So what can be done about getting the suppliers and the people back together?